Welcome, welcome. This is a live talk about non-duality. The time is now, the place is here. But I need a drink of water. All right, so today we're going to talk about non-duality. And I think what I want to focus on in this video is talking a little bit about, why non-duality, what's the point, what's the purpose, especially when we talk about this idea that non-duality doesn't provide any benefit to really change anything. From that perspective, why would anyone be interested in this topic? Because we talk about what non-duality is, and that's where people get confused with terms and definitions. And obviously, the simplest way to say it is that non-duality means not two. And so if you were to talk to someone on the street and say, hey, non-duality, I've heard of that. What is that? What is that? Tell me about that. What does that mean? And you say, well, it means not two, that reality is not two. Like, oh, okay. And then they go on their merry way. So, why would someone get into the, I mean, obviously there are a lot of speakers that talk about it, and maybe it's more trendy nowadays than in the past, like every sort of kind of development, if you will. I think there's a reason why right now it's something that more people are interested in. I think partly because of the duality that we do see in our culture at this time in our human development, but also I think with in a bigger sense, in a bigger cycle, I think we're moving through kind of a change as far as the societal, cultural mass of consciousness switching over to kind of a different level, if you will, a new way of thinking. But that's not what non-duality is about, because non-duality doesn't really matter what time or period or culture you live in. It's always the same truth. Before I get into that a little bit more, I just want to mention a couple things. One of the things I wanted to talk about was I got a comment from a listener, and I do want to say before I get further into this video that if you haven't subscribed yet, do subscribe. I'm trying to get to, I guess the goal at this point would be to get to 1,000 subscribers. Right now I'm at 266. So if you haven't subscribed, click the button wherever it ends up being on the screen. Because I guess the reason for that is right now for these live talks, with this hair, for these live talks, I use a laptop. The picture quality is okay, the sound's okay, but what I'd like to do is use my phone, which got this cool Enneagram pop socket. You should get yourself one of these. You'll be one of the cool kids. And I am thirsty. This isn't just like a prop. I like having props, but so yeah, I want to get to 1,000 subscribers. Then I can do live talks like this, kind of wherever I'd like to do them. Obviously, right now where I'm at, we're moving into the wintry season, so probably wouldn't be outside too much anytime soon, but in the future. So hopefully my goal is by spring, 1,000 subscribers. There's my plug. Hopefully you're not super bored at this point. But if you have any questions, if you're watching right now, ask your question in the live chat. I'll try to address it. So then the other thing I wanted to mention was I got a comment from one of my subscribers. I don't know if this person subscribes, but they said I'll skip to the good part. But when I stumble across profane spiritual proletariat that you are, I am amused and I chuckle. Thanks for this silly video. So that was on kind of my best method to experience non-duality, which now has over 10,000 views. But the interesting thing part was I liked when this person said that I'm a profane spiritual proletariat. PSP. I feel like I should get a t-shirt that says that. I think it's very fitting. I don't know if they're being tongue-in-cheek, but I enjoyed it. So I do like reading your comments, and that's kind of where I get some of my inspiration for some of these videos. But one of the other things I wanted to do starting today, right now, in this moment, I'm going to call 90-second non-duality. So yeah, I've been making videos. Some of them range from 3 minutes to 30 minutes, let's say, talking about non-duality. I think that's great, and I think that works, but I think eventually for any speaker, people kind of get overload where it's like, I've watched this person talk for a long period of time, and after a while, I'm like, I get it, I get what they're trying to say, and it kind of gets, you move on to something else, which is fine. It's like I don't want to be a guru, but I do like communicating with people and kind of having that sense of community. And that's part of why I do this. But as far as, watching videos, we only have so much time in the day. Part of the social dilemma is we spend a lot of time immersed in the matrix of the digital world. And so with this 90-second video, I want to just have a little quick snippet, some idea, whatever the inspiration is at that point in time, to kind of just be out there, a short little nugget, just so it's easier to kind of digest. So you don't have to sit and be like, oh, I got to watch this 10-minute video. I don't have 10 minutes. Like, you're probably better off going outside and taking a walk, or reading a book, or listening to music, or cooking, working out, doing any sorts of thing. But I do appreciate the people that do take the time to listen. And so with that said, since I can't do anything live on my phone, what I am going to do right here, right now, is record a video that I will post after this one, the very first 90-second non-duality video ever created by me, Russ Rapp. And I'm going to do it portrait, so it'll stand out. It'll look a little different than my other videos. So here we go. Switch it over to a video. Okay, let's flip it around. Fix my hair a little bit. I am going to get a homemade haircut today, so it'll look different later. But all right, here we go. This is how the what's that saying? How the cake is made, or you get to see live how videos get made in the first shot here. Hi, this is Russ Rapp, and welcome to my YouTube channel, where I talk about non-duality. Hopefully, if you comment, I'll hopefully answer your questions that you have. That's kind of the main goal of my channel when it comes to 90-second non-duality. So in 90 seconds, I'm going to cover some idea aspect. Maybe I'll just sit here and do nothing for 90 seconds. The whole idea of the 90-second non-duality is that it's something that can be quick, easy to digest, something that you can watch in a short period of time. It's easier for me to make, so I don't have to spend so much effort making a longer video. So in 90 seconds, I'm going to cover non-duality. So if you haven't subscribed to my page, click the subscribe button now so I can get up to 1,000 subscribers. That's the goal. So we're at 60 seconds. I'm going to flip the camera around, I think. So you can see how versed I am at. Okay, well, at some point I'll figure out how to flip the camera on. Let's go like this. All right, so we're doing a live talk right now. And stay tuned, subscribe. We'll be in touch. 90-second non-duality. There you go. That's how it's done. All right. Okay, so let's get into, if you have any questions, feel free to ask in the live chat. And so what we're talking about here is non-duality in the sense of what's the whole point. And I've addressed this somewhat to an extent before, because ultimately there is no point, but it's, if I was talking about, the how to change a tire, how to make a bed, how to, bake cookies or something like that, that provides a use, that provides added value, a benefit for the people that watch that video. And so a lot of people go onto YouTube to find how-to videos, do-it-yourself kind of videos, and that's kind of the whole purpose of it. And so the paradox, the funny part is when you're talking about non-duality, it doesn't really offer anything exactly, but maybe it points to the flaw in your thinking, I guess. But so how do you communicate non-duality to people who aren't already interested, haven't heard about it, haven't come across it? Is it just a matter of timing? Is that what we're talking about? It has to be the right time for people. Do you want to talk about it? It's a great question, because maybe non-duality is always going to be stuck in the fringe dweller category, or the margins, the periphery, never really hitting mainstream. And I think potentially if it ever did gain ground, become more mainstream, then it'll become what it's not. Something that you're trying to achieve, or sometimes you're trying to become, you're trying to be, when with non-duality it is what you are. Hello, Julio Salinas. So when it comes to non-duality, I think if we talk about it in terms of religion versus spirituality, I think in a lot of ways we separate this idea of, yeah, none of us are here, nothing's happening. Yeah. So Julio says, yes, I'm not here, la hala. Well, bienvenido, or no? Okay. You're welcome, even though you're not here. So religion versus spirituality, we separate that in how we talk about it in a lot of ways. I think a lot of times people see religion as having a lot of rules, having a history of that maybe isn't something that we see as an ideal history. It's been used to start wars and to fight amongst people. And so people see it in that sense in a negative way. And so especially, I don't know if it's since maybe the 60s or so, but I think more and more people are talking about spirituality versus religion as being some sort of more free, more accepting form of being connected to a higher purpose, a higher a sense of God, however you want to define it. It's a little bit more, let's say, inclusive than religion is. That's, I think, the perception is, to some extent. I think part of it goes to what I was saying about the change in human consciousness, kind of going from, if you look into spiral dynamics, I really like that kind of framework on human development. Ken Wilber talks a lot about it in his Brief History of Everything book. Or if you want to read kind of a fiction version, Boomeritis is a really good book. I read it a long time ago, so I don't remember all the details. But when it comes to that, I think that maybe play part in how we see religion, how we see spirituality. But as that relates to non-duality, I think anytime we split something in our minds or in the way we communicate or understand things, is not necessarily a bad thing, doing a separation, because especially if you do read Ken Wilber, he talks a lot about dissociation versus differentiation. So as we develop as human beings, we differentiate, but then we transcend, and then we include what has come before. And so there's nothing wrong with differentiating things in our minds, but if you differentiate where there is no mutual inclusion between the two things, then you're basically separating them out incorrectly, if you will. And for non-duality saying, well, there is really no religion versus spirituality. It's just kind of how we communicate that, the idea of that. And so when we talk about religion, here we go. Julio says non-duality is saying nothing really, not even that it's silence. Non-duality is saying nothing really, not even that it's silence. Yeah, I think I know what you're saying as far as silence versus not silence, because there's never really a static moment. There's never really perfect silence, if you will, in the sense of the 3D world, in the sense of how we interact with through experience. But the silence permeates all of that. So it's not something that we experience. I mean, you can go to a quiet room, you can try to go somewhere and meditate in a cave or something, and that may seem silence, but that's just your immediate experience of the moment. But it's not, it's not about trying to turn off music and trying to get as quiet as possible. That's just something that the separate self is thinking that needs to happen, because the silence is in the speech, it's in the noise, it's in the babbling brook, it's in the volcano, it's in the wind through the trees. Silence is always there. You may not realize it, you may not experience it in that sense, but there's a peace throughout all that, even in anger, in emotion. So Julio says, I mean, when we use words, we are in a logical story. It has no relation to non-duality. I just want to say I appreciate you saying that, Julio, because honestly, I started to lose track of what I was even saying with religion and spirituality, because and what you just said right there is exactly what I was trying to get into here. So Julio says, I mean, when we use words, we are in a logical story. It has no relation to non-duality. So okay, so that's where, when it comes to non-duality, there is no story, essentially, or there doesn't need to be a story. The message of non-duality is very simple, not to, meaning, in a sense, no separation. And so I think some of the better speakers when it comes to non-duality use examples, use stories in a lot of ways. There are some speakers that just basically negate everything. So when you say, well, how do I understand this? Or how does this work? And then it's like, well, there is no person, there is no one here. And it just constantly is like a contrarian type of a stance. And so people get frustrated by that, and then finally realize, oh, that's the whole point. So there's that kind of technique that non-dual speakers use, but then other speakers talk in stories, use stories from the past, ancient kind of teachings, or something more recent. And that's how, as human beings, in a lot of ways, we connect with stories. And so when we try to separate religion and spirituality, it becomes, either way, it's missing a piece, if you will. And so if we're just talking about non-duality without a story, then people can't connect with that. And so religion throughout history has always had aspects of the mystical, aspects of non-dual teachings, but they're woven in the stories and the understanding of the time period of the culture that the religion was produced. And so, when people connect with, like, I have more of a biblical background uh, as far as my story goes, and so I connect with a lot of the stories from the Bible through Jesus's teachings. And so woven throughout that are those pieces of non-dual wisdom, if you will, that's a part of that religion. It's not separate from. So spirituality isn't separate from religion in that sense, where religion isn't teaching these deep truths, and spirituality doesn't have a hold on these ideas, and religion is just a bunch of rules and things that we have to follow. It's not as simple as that. And when we make that differentiation, or we make that division, then we're kind of missing the forest for the trees. And so, if you can connect with some of these ancient texts or these stories, then that can give people something to grab onto. Because if you're constantly in this state of negation, that there is no person, or the reality that we experience is unreal, then there's literally no ground to stand on, which there is no ground to stand on, but then no one really connects to the message itself. And it's not necessary for people to connect with the message. That's the funny part. But I guess I'm just kind of describing how I see it working as far as people's experience with non-duality. Because when, with family and friends that I've talked about, oh, I make these videos. Oh, you make videos. What about? Oh, it's about non-duality. Well, what's non-duality? And I explain it, and then it's just like, empty stare. And then, we talk about football or something else. Let's see. Julio says, yes, most use some kind of disclaimer when they start and then ramble on into stories. Yeah, exactly. And I think, I don't know exactly. I don't always go back and watch. Oh, I usually don't. I guess lately go back and watch the videos that I'm making to see how it comes across. So I only know through communicating with you how this is perceived on the other end of the communication. And really, that's essentially, there is no communication without the other. Essentially, communication itself, discourse, how we talk about it, always assumes a separation between this and that. So the communication between this and that. But there can't be communication, there can't be connection without the other, if that makes sense. You can't have two separate things. There always has to be that connection. And that's how I guess I would see, in one way you can describe non-duality, is there always is a communication. Even if you're like a molecule, like, I identify as a molecule, that communication between one molecule and another molecule, and how those electrons interact and stuff, that's always in communication. There's never not a communication, but within that bond, that connection is emptiness. And so that's how people describe it, as empty fullness. So Julio says there is always communication. I agree. Yes, there's always something going on, but there's nothing going on. Especially, if you look at human nature, historically, it's, not a lot of changes that happen throughout the years. We typically interact in a lot of the same ways, even as we develop from one stage to the next. We got about 10 more minutes. I've talked a lot about what I wanted to focus on today of separating religion and spirituality and how, one is sometimes seen as better than the other, but really the difference is very superficial. And if you haven't subscribed to my channel, subscribe. I'm assuming if you're listening to it live, you probably got the notification, or maybe you just saw it as you're scrolling through YouTube. I don't really know. But I'm going to post a 90-second non-duality video I just made. Did it live during this session here, so that'll be posted here in a little bit today. So I'm going to try to do that over, a little bit more often, I guess, than some of these. I'm looking at doing live talks maybe once a week, maybe make a video once a month or so. And so I want to kind of pepper that in with some little shorter videos that maybe people will see or have value in, or because at the end of the day, non-duality doesn't add value, but I think as human beings, we connect with others, and that's how we learn, is through listening and through communication, community with others. So this is where I can sit quietly and not talk, which is totally fine. Julio says, but we live in the dream. So let's talk about the dream. Laugh out loud. Yeah, exactly. And that's going to be, I think, for the next time I talk, for the live talk, or maybe the next video. I don't know. Or maybe both. That's what I want to talk about. Because I know, like, if you've ever listened to Paul Hederman, he talks a lot about this idea of the dreamerless dream, that there is no dreamer, it's just dreaming. And in a sense, if you look at it this way, a lot of the questions that, if you watch, if people have like non-dual conferences or talks or whatever in front of a group of people, a lot of people end up asking a lot the same questions over and over again in a different way. And it's kind of like if I had a dream last night and I tell you the story of the dream, and then you ask, well, was this character in your dream, were they conscious? Were they, and we start talking about the items, the individual things in the dream and what happened. And I would give the same answer. It was just part of the dream. But yeah, but what about the frog? Was the frog alive? Was the frog, part of, was the frog conscious, or what level was the frog non-dual? It's like, it's part of the dream. It's a dream. And yet, we can take that life is but a dream and say, well, life doesn't have value in the sense, in a human sense, but that's not really what it's saying either. And so we're like a dreamerless dream where dreaming seems to be happening, but that's not necessarily a moral kind of a judgment as far as that goes, because it doesn't change anything as far as how we interact, how we set up our society as human beings. Like, to think about it from the frog standpoint, the frog's still going to be a frog, whether or not it understands the nature of reality or not. It's still going to be a frog. It's still going to eat flies. And so we're still going to be human beings, even if we somehow say that life is but a dream. It's just words. All right. So Julio says, I have, probably talking about Paul Hederman. Yes, it's very interesting. But the dream is valuable since we are in it. There's nothing outside the dream. Yeah, exactly. And so it's, well, what can I do with non-duality? What's the point? What's the purpose? There is no purpose. You can say that about every question. So the answer is always kind of the same. So I guess the question is this glass half, or no, is this glass full or empty? Well, if you're talking about water, then it's basically empty. If you're talking about anything, it's got air in it, so it's not really empty. Nothing's ever really empty, but everything's empty. All right, welcome Going Home. Going Home says, is there anything I can do to realize non-duality? It's a good question. Is there anything I can do to realize non-duality? I think that's always the crux of the issue. And I think when I make non-dual videos, it's for people that have some knowledge about what non-duality is talking about. And that's often the question. For other people, it's like, well, what's the point? I don't understand even the point of non-duality, or why would you want to realize it anyway? Julio says nope. That's I guess how I would describe it is non-duality doesn't need you to recognize or to realize. So I think there are moments in life where you see yourself as a character, you recognize you're basically performing a script based on your upbringing, based on your personality type, based on your conditioning, if you will, based on your genetics, however you want to describe the habitual nature of what you define as yourself, how you see you. That's going to be there. And I think sometimes there are moments where some of that seems to fall away, and the script that you hold on to is seen for what it is. I think in those moments there's a recognition of non-duality, but I think in the same breath it's not some sort of like higher level or some higher level of energy or consciousness or something like that. It's the recognition in those moments is that the peace that you are seeing or realizing in those moments has always been there, and it's not a requirement to achieve that sense of not being a person. And I've said this before, but I think people think, oh, I want non-duality, I want to realize non-duality because I don't want to be a person, I want to be a non-person. It's like, well, if you have dementia and you can't remember your name or you can't function, that's not something that seemingly is what people would want. And so you're not necessarily seeking what you think you're seeking. And in non-duality, I think the whole message of it is to point to the seeking that you're doing in the moment, to recognize, to see it for what it is. Julio says we can't even get what it is. We use words to describe it, but we can never get it. And I would agree to that. I think how our minds work, at one moment you may have this epiphany, you may have this realization of non-duality, but then in the next it may seem different, and you may understand it in a moment, but then your mind takes over and starts analyzing it, if you're analytical person, and basically beats the horse to death, where the once moment of clarity or peace that you have seemingly experienced is no longer there, and then it's on to the next thing. And so you listen to one speaker about non-duality and you're like, oh, I get it, I had this moment of like, oh, or you're just walking down the street, or you're just sitting in a room, and it's just like everything is non-duality, everything is me, and nothing is, because what I define as me or everything is just words, it's just a thought. And so you maybe have those moments, but then if those seemingly go away, then on to the next thing. And that's where a lot of spiritual practices, like, oh, I use it to an extent, and then I always hit a wall, and then it's on to the next thing. And so, that's where non-duality is basically saying there is no next thing. Like, there's always a wall, but the wall doesn't exist. We call Julio says we call it everything and what is, but these are concepts in the dream. Well, yeah, even non-duality is a concept, so it's just an idea. It's something that we tell ourselves to try to understand, to be able to communicate with one another. But like I said, your mind is limited. Your mind, or your brain, your thought process, not big mind or universal mind, but the functioning part of your brain, the understanding process of your brain is limited and will never understand it. And so I think for me with non-duality there's seemingly a recognition of the flawed nature that is always forgiven. But that could change, seemingly. I mean, that's what he uses words. There's always paradoxes. There's always talking about opposites. You can talk about non-duality, saying that there is nothing or everything is nothing, but there's everything. It's just like, your mind grabs onto one side of the coin, one side of the division, one side of what we're talking about, and then non-duality flips it on its head and says, "Oh, wait, there's this other side over here." So we're always talking about this non-duality. There's no person, and then the opposite of that there is no person is that there is a person, and so those are simultaneously true in a sense, or they're both untrue in a sense. And so that's where, if you get so focused on the experience of non-duality, then that ends up being something that you're seeking. Whereas you have to bring in the fact that there is nothing you can do. You are what you are looking for, as Paul Hederman would say. And so anytime that you have a belief or you grab onto a concept or an idea about non-duality, then the key to that attachment is in the attachment itself. And so if I start believing that there is no person, then the key to the release of that is in the idea itself, looking at that and seeing that it's not true. Julio says yes. Okay, so I went a little over here, but it's good back and forth. So I appreciate everyone participating today. And Julio says, even words like real and unreal are concepts. They do not apply or have no relation to what we call non-duality. Yes, but I think the reason why those terms are used is because we're so attached to what we consider real, our thought forms, our ideas of the world, that by saying that they're unreal and that there is no person stops us in our tracks and says, wait, I've always assumed this since I can remember. And it puts us in a position of opening up to other possibilities. But then we use that as, well, we need to be more non-dual. We need to make a non-dual society so we love each other and get along. It's like, no, non-duality isn't about something that's happening in the world, like everyone gets along. Like, that has nothing to do with it. Non-duality is in storms. It is in abuse. It is in everything negative. It is in the shadow. And so it's not something that is an experience in that sense. So, all right, I appreciate it. Until next time, peace.